There are a huge number of characters who've only been in one episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and today we're going to talk about every single important one. Starting with Philip Davidson from Season 5, Episode 14, The Box, who was a dentist and a prime murder suspect interrogated by Jake Peralta and Captain Holt. Alright, I think we all remember this episode pretty clearly. Davidson was brought in when his dental partner, Robert Tupper, was found dead. The issue? There was no physical evidence tying Philip to the crime. Jake was tasked with getting a confession, in which Holt later joined him. At first, it seemed like a lost cause. Philip Davidson answered every question calmly and insisted he had nothing to do with it. Then, Peralta and the captain spent hours questioning him, switching strategies and pressing Philip on every detail of his timeline, which also included his relationship with Tupper and what exactly he was doing on the night of the murder. Eventually, Jake figured out Philip's weakness. Davidson could not be framed as someone who got lucky and did a sloppy job. So, when Peralta went on a rampage and kept insisting Philip didn't plan the crime, he stood up and confessed to everything with only 8 minutes left on the clock.
Yes, it was. You got lucky at every turn.
No, I knew exactly where I was driving. I left my phone in the office on purpose. I was in a surgical suite by design, and I didn't use some glass award that any idiot would clearly see was missing. I made a rod out of a special dental polymer, killed him with it, then melted it back down. It's already in the patient's mouth, son!
Talk about a clutch performance from Jake. This highly intense interrogation resulted in some fans even calling it my favorite episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and I must admit, it's one of my favorites too. However, without our next character, one of Jake's most confusing cases might have never gotten solved, or at least he would think so, because Franco McCoy from Season 6, Episode 6, The Crime Scene, is a CSI agent who's full of himself. He gets assigned to a very difficult and confusing case that's being investigated by Rosa Diaz and Jake Peralta. Right from the get-go, McCoy offends the detectives by mocking their clothes, over-explaining simple stuff, and giving them unwanted advice. However, as the episode progresses, it turns out that the CSI agent is actually pretty good at his job, just not human interaction. Yeah, he should probably work on that. Franco even goes so far that he shows up in Amy and Jake's bedroom one night to help with the case, which had me bursting out in laughter when he just randomly appeared at their house. In the end, Peralta solves the case and McCoy gives credit where credit is due. Even though Franco is portrayed as annoying, he's actually well liked, with fans both saying, "I wish Franco McCoy, CSI, had more involvement," and him even winning a Reddit poll for the funniest one-time character. Speaking of a guy who's great at his job, this next person is known as one of the best detectives Captain Holt ever worked with. Because Frank Dillman from Season 7, Episode 9, Dillman, is the legendary detective and a friend of Raymond Holt. In the episode, Frank is introduced when Holt invited him to help figure out who planted a glitter bomb in Jake's desk, which ended up destroying evidence in a murder case. After the squad went back and forth accusing each other, Dillman very conveniently found a receipt from Party Zone at Jake's desk. This would indicate that Peralta did it to himself, and he was immediately suspended. However, Jake was determined to prove his innocence and returned later the same day, but with hard evidence that he didn't do it. Because what he figured out was that Frank Dillman, the same man who found the receipt, was the one who planted it in the first place. In addition to that, Jake figured out that Frank had been fired from being a detective and had therefore returned to get a job at the precinct. Dillman miserably failed, and Charles Boyle ended up solving the case by himself. Yet, fans still said that this is now my favorite episode in the show. It was perfect, and people, including myself, loved the dynamic between Dillman and Holt, even though it didn't end that well. Now, imagine a guy who's both good-looking, a swimwear model, and also so smart that he creates crosswords for the newspaper. That guy is Melvin Sturmley from Season 5, Episode 15, The Puzzle Master. Sturmley is the man who managed to intimidate Jake Peralta the most when it came to Amy Santiago. Melvin shows up due to a serial arson case where the fire seems to be connected to the Saturday crossword puzzles, which Sturmley's in charge of. No wonder Amy admires him so much, and a little fun fact, it's actually Amy Santiago's real-life husband who plays Melvin Sturmley. Anyways, it was Jake who picked the case and chose to call Melvin to make Amy's last investigation as a detective the best ever. And after the three of them work together through several puzzles and riddles, they end up catching the arsonist, Helen Gerbelson, who happened to be a stalker of Melvin Sternley, who is trying to spell out "marry me or else I will kill you. Yours forever, Helen Gerbelson." Truly disturbing. Yet, our next character wasn't exactly as charming as Melvin was. Actually, he was the complete opposite. Because Captain Seth Dozerman from Season 3, Episode 1, New Captain, is one of several captains who tried their luck replacing Holt. However, Dozerman would never make it that far. When Seth arrived in the precinct, it was to replace Holt after he was transferred to head of public relations. And yes, you guessed it was not Raymond's own idea. Madeline Wunsch made it happen. Well, it all kicks off with Dozerman passing out right after giving his introduction. Sounds innocent, right? Well, this would become a big issue later. The new captain starts out with being totally rude, obnoxious, and almost like a dictator. He tells the detectives that they need to work 8 times as hard as they usually do and hands out dozer pads. These devices are given to the squad to make sure they complete their task and to improve productivity. However, after only serving as captain for 2 days, Seth Dozerman walks into the copy room where he finds Amy and Jake kissing and goes on a rant about how they can't be dating. The shock from the discovery gave him a heart attack, and Seth died right in front of the 2 detectives. The fans have very mixed opinions here, with some saying that it's such a shame he only lasted 1 episode, and others saying that any more than that and he would have become the most annoying character of the series. And frankly, I think that last statement is correct. Speaking of a character who is totally rude and horrible to people, this character is just as bad, if not worse. Because Eleanor Hortzweil from Season 3, Episode 11, Hostage Situation, is Charles Boyle's ex-wife, and my god, she is one of the characters I absolutely hate. Because Hortzweil arrives to confront Boyle after he wants to make a withdrawal of his sperm to have kids with his girlfriend, Genevieve. Eleanor claims that it's legally her sperm and has already withdrawn it. Oh boy, this is where it begins to get sticky. Charles' ex-wife came to blackmail him. The ex-wife had hit a 90-year-old priest with her car and ordered Boyle to intimidate the poor old guy as a policeman, so he would drop the lawsuit. That is the only way she'll give Charles Boyle the sperm. Jake and Charles then formulate a plan to go see Hortzweil and treat the sperm like a hostage, meaning Boyle will offer his hairdresser he got in the divorce, while he will get his sperm. In an attempt to trick Eleanor Hortzweil, she destroys the sperm, resulting in Boyle and Genevieve adopting instead. I mean, how can you be that horrible to another person? However, while Eleanor was unnecessarily mean, our next character was actually a good guy. Or so it seemed. Because Mark Devereaux from Season 4, Episode 14, Serve and Protect, is the definition of a wannabe cop. He's literally an actor playing a detective in a fictional TV show inside a real TV show. I know it sounds confusing, but let me explain. Jake Peralta and Rosa Diaz are called to a movie set to investigate Mark's co-star's stolen laptop. What they meet is Mark Devereaux, who truly believes he's a cop after playing one for 15 years, and proceeds to give them some meaningless insights, like he actually knows what he's doing. As the episode progresses, Mark keeps insisting on helping and really thinks he's a cop. The suspicion is initially on the executive producer, but in the end, they literally find the laptop in the back of Devereaux's car, pinning the fake cop to the crime. When Jake and Rosa bring him into the precinct, Mark of course tries to act it out as an innocent man, but I couldn't help laughing when he cracked like 5 seconds into the interrogation.
Ridiculous. I've never been more insulted in my life. Your theory is outrageous, and what's more, it's just a theory. I don't know how cops around here do things, but where I come from, we're burdened with the little thing we like to call evidence, of which you don't have a shred.
We found Cassie's laptop in the trunk of your car.
I stand corrected. Yeah, you got me. I did it. Good job.
And while Mark spent his time playing a cop, this pair was actually the real deal. Because Soren Nosgard and Agneta Carlson from Season 3, Episode 9, The Swedes, are the complete opposite partnership from Jake and Rosa. In this episode, after a Swedish thief was caught, they were flown in from Sweden to assist in the investigation. However, in the beginning, the Swedish pair seems very cold and annoyed of Peralta and Diaz, and tells them how close they are as partners. Yes, they even sauna together. To me, it's really weird that colleagues act like this, but each to their own, I guess. Well, as the episode progresses, the American and Swedish detectives end up competing. I mean, it was probably more competition for Jake and Rosa. Agneta and Soren were just trying to help. But in the end, Peralta and Diaz end up solving the crime, and much to their surprise, the Swedes congratulate them and return back to Sweden. And while Jake couldn't stand working with the Swedish pair, this next character is actually the favorite cop he ever worked with, or so it used to be. Because Stevie Schillens from Season 3, Episode 15, The 9-8, is Jake Peralta's very first partner back when they were beat cops. When the precinct Schillens worked at were forced to temporarily relocate to the 9-9, Jake reacts badly to the news, but gets super happy when he sees his old partner. However, Charles Boyle, who is very close with Jake, is instantly jealous. It proceeds with Jake inviting Stevie out with him and Boyle to get Schillens involved, much to Charles' annoyance. I really felt bad for him the first time I watched it. Throughout the episode, Peralta and Schillens are bonding more and more, while Charles is getting neglected. They accidentally leave without him, barely listen to him, and generally just treat Boyle like he wasn't even there. In the end though, when Charles Boyle discovers that Stevie planted drugs on a crime scene, he finally gets to exact his revenge by having Schillens arrested. Jake then makes up with Boyle, and they get back to jamming in the car together.
Unbreak my heart, say you love me again.
Speaking of planting drugs, this next character also got caught with a lot of drugs. Or did he really? Because David Santiago from Season 6, Episode 9, The Golden Child, is Amy Santiago's seemingly perfect brother. But he is hiding a secret. Well, to understand the context, let's start from the beginning. David is the favorite child of the family and is flawless in every sense. During a dinner with Jake and Amy, David tells a story about how he saved a woman's life. He discloses that he got a platinum certification right after it was announced Amy got a gold certification, and he also saved Peralta from choking with the Heimlich maneuver. Seems like no one can beat David, right? Yet, not long after, still during the dinner, David Santiago's captain shows up and tells them that they found large quantities of cocaine in his desk. Oops. Amy tries to act sorry, but couldn't help smiling. But here's the crazy part. It turns out all that cocaine was actually planted in his desk. Yep, that's right. David really is that perfect boy. And once he was found innocent, us as fans find out why he's so amazing, because his mother just keeps praising him. In the end, Jake Peralta couldn't take it anymore. So when Amy Santiago left to use the bathroom, he went on a rampage, scolding his mother-in-law for treating Amy like crap. Despite this, fans actually think he's a genuinely nice person, even though he is arrogant. However, while David really was the perfect man, this next character is the polar opposite. Because Trevor Podolsky from Season 1, Episode 2, The Tagger, was a spoiled brat that happened to be the son of Deputy Commissioner Podolsky, and also one of the most annoying one-timers I can think of. Trevor was arrested by Jake Peralta and Captain Holt when he was caught vandalizing police cars by painting penises on them. Trevor Podolsky was taken back to the precinct when Jake realizes that it's the Deputy Commissioner's son, who later turned up at the station and demanded his son to be released. He simply said that boy needs to be boys, and Jake must have made a mistake. I mean, come on, he literally caught him in the act. Talk about using your power wrong. However, when Jake discovered that Trevor had been arrested over a dozen times, with each and every time getting bailed out by his dad, Holt convinces him to arrest the kid and goes with him as backup. And despite the objections from Trevor's dad, Peralta proceeds to arrest him and gets threatened by the commissioner. Luckily, Holt backed up Jake, and Trevor Podolsky finally faced consequences for his actions. And just like Trevor, this next character is not exactly an angel either, because Kate Peralta from Season 5, Episode 17, DFW, is Jake Peralta's younger half-sister who came to visit from Texas. And talk about a first impression. When Jake and Amy picked her up at the airport, Kate was getting dragged by security wearing handcuffs. I mean, she only vaped on the plane, totally unfair. Oh, and she might also have punched a stewardess real hard in the face, but minor detail. After leaving a horrible first impression, Kate Peralta reveals that she's going to move to New York City, which doesn't sound that appealing to Amy and Jake, so they decide to call up Kate's ex-boyfriend Kurt to get her to take him back. The plan seems to be working until a guy Kate Peralta hooked up with shows up, which upsets her ex, who then leaves. The siblings get into an argument, which ends up with Kate going to the airport, never wanting to see Jake again. However, in the end, the two of them made up and agreed to stay in touch. An eerily similar story of our next character. This woman is also coming to visit his brother. However, things quickly escalate because Debbie Holt from Season 3, Episode 13, The Cruise, is Captain Holt's very dramatic and loud younger sister, the straight opposite of Raymond Holt himself. When Holt announces to the squad that Hurricane Debbie, aka his sister, is coming and she's the drama queen of the family, Gina Linetti and Terry Jeffords believe that he's over-exaggerating, but when meeting Debbie, they realize she is very loud and on top of that, very rude to Holt. Well, it only gets worse. She tells the captain she's going to be staying for 6 weeks and be all up in his life. This results in Raymond consulting with none other than Gina, who advises him to be as dramatic as her. As a result, Holt convinced his sister he had a lot on his plate and even faked drama to get rid of her. Right when he succeeded, Debbie mentioned that the only reason she came was that her husband left her. This had the captain feeling really bad. In the end, Raymond ends up making a fort in his office where he and his sister can talk, and Holt ends up apologizing for pushing her away. That was all the major one-time characters that have been on Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Let me know if you think someone else deserves a spot on the list in the comment section below.